With the draft just days away now, the NHL trade window and buyout window continue to offer some spicy rumors. Find out all of that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. On tonight's episode, like I said, the trade market continues to heat up. Things are getting very spicy and interesting. Naturally, all of this does, in fact, involve the Winnipeg Jets, or at least some of it does. Although I would say, like, what happens with the next couple of deals and what happens with McGroarty could really shake the market up quite a bit, right? McGroarty is going to be one of the most sought-after trade pieces amidst all of this, and it sounds like he's not the only one that teams are very interested in. We're going to dive into some interesting rumors, as well as a deal that just broke about 2 hours ago or so, maybe a little bit less, in just a moment. But before we go any further, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Now, like I said, the NHL trade market is certainly buzzing right now. Winnipeg is very much in on this. I think this is probably about as exciting as it's going to be for the Jets over the next couple of weeks. After this, I suspect things are going to be a little bit quieter as Winnipeg starts to work through some of the longer-term organizational needs. But we did actually just have a trade go through within the past hour or two. We have seen Ilya Mikheyev get sent to the Blackhawks. Sam Lafferty and a second rounder was also sent. And in exchange, Vancouver got cap space and a fourth round pick. Now, Vancouver's also retaining 15% of Mikheyev's salary. But if you're the Hawks, right, you don't really mind this. I suspect that like Mikheyev might be like, I don't know if he's going to be like a flip option. I mean, if you retain salary or something, maybe you could try and turn him into something decent, right? Not exactly like a high round pick, but maybe you get like another third rounder or something. I don't know. I also think that like Chicago is going to need warm bodies to play for them, and Mikheyev might kind of fit that bill. He didn't really work out in Vancouver. I think they very much prematurely signed him, based on a very small sample size of success. They quickly came to regret that trade. And like, while he was pretty decent in, Toronto, I just feel like whatever Vancouver thought that they were getting with him, it didn't really turn out that way. His scoring rates were pretty low. He didn't really generate a ton. Like, if we're being honest, Mason Appleton kind of had a better season this past year than he did. So, probably not a big asset that I'd say is really worth getting excited about. Some folks were kind of talking about maybe Mikheyev being a good Jets target at some point, and if he was cheap enough, I wouldn't really be against it in terms of fortifying your bottom six. But like, at this point, does he really move the needle? Probably not. So either way, Chicago gets like a couple of items out of it. They get, a couple of roster players and a nice second rounder. But, all of this to say that in terms of like the big blockbusters, we're still waiting a little bit to, hear the first shoe drop, right? And one of the big ones is Marty Necas. Necas, of course, is a guy I was talking about yesterday as a potential party for, the Jets to be interested in acquiring his rights. Obviously, he's a big RFA. He's due a huge contract extension, and a lot of people view him as like a top-end player. But to be honest, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. You're going to find this really funny, but over the last two seasons, Chad DeDominicus actually did some analysis and was looking at some of the base level stats, and he has a 5v5 goals per 60 rate at the same level of Zemgus Girgensson. So if you think Necas is really going to move the needle for your 5v5 offense, you might want to kind of ask a little bit more about that. Now, I do think, Necas is obviously more skilled than Girgensons is. I think, Marty is more capable of also being an asset on the power play. That is definitely true. I just think in terms of like the 5v5 even strength play driving ability, I do wonder a little bit about it. That scoring rate at 5v5 is not great. You can say it's just over 2 seasons, and, that's certainly true, but it's not great. If we're being honest, it's not great. We are also hearing that the Devils supposedly are willing to give up the 10th overall pick in this year's draft in exchange for him, which I wouldn't do. I like Necas. I think he's skilled. Don't know if I would do that kind of deal, right? For New Jersey, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter what they do with that pick if they get like a young roster player that they think they can fix. They're generally a pretty smart team when it comes to forwards, so maybe they see something in Necas that perhaps doesn't yet reflect in some of the other parts of his game, but 10th overall is a little steep, but I guess you're also talking about a top 10 pick that's like on the bottom end of top 10, right? Like you're talking about the last pick in that range, and apparently the 1 through 8 picks are way too expensive. That's what they're saying. Teams are sort of backing off from trying to acquire any of these picks, and so it looks like if you're trying to get into the first round, you're looking more towards the middle or back half of the pack, which if you're the Jets, I don't really know that that's all that appealing, right? Unless you're getting in like the top 10, it's just hard to get excited about that. McGroarty could potentially bring a 10th or like 11th/12th sort of pick. I really would not keep going down that list, though. I know that he was taken at, 14th overall, but with the amount of development and the progress that he's made, he's clearly worth a better selection. So, he's also close to being pro ready. He's going to step into a lineup at some point next season, and I think that should factor into his value. As far as the Jets are concerned, I feel like we're just really trying to wait and see what happens with McGroarty. That deal, I think, is a lot closer than it seems. It might happen as early as tomorrow. It's definitely supposed to happen before the draft, unless something kind of goes a little bit pear-shaped. We're also waiting to hear, the announcement that either one of Neil Pionk or Nate Schmidt is to be waived. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Schmidt. I think he's going to be the guy that they buy out. I would be curious to know if they try and move him instead in a trade, right? If they give up like a lower round pick or something, in exchange to get the salary off the books, maybe they do some kind of a deal with Utah. Not entirely sure. Utah is obviously looking for some players, some guys who can be decent leaders, I would imagine. They don't have a lot to work with at present. And in terms of guys who are under contract, they just signed Liam O'Brien, which tells you the state of their current offseason. There's not a lot going on. As far as McGroarty goes, I do wonder where he ends up, because there's a lot of teams that could use a Rutger, but this whole stink that he had with not playing in the NHL immediately does make me wonder if that's maybe given at least 1 or 2 people cold feet. But in terms of the talent, zero question it's there. He's been great for Michigan. He looks like he's ready for the pros now. It's really just a question of what team is going to fit his desires. And I do wonder if it's the Ducks. Anaheim's got some great D prospects, a surplus of them, if you will. They've got Cutter, who's apparently Rutger's best friend, and certainly a guy who set the mold for forcing his way off the team, and maybe Rutger wants to go join him. Supposing the deal works out for both parties, I'd be down with that. I would have been fine with trading McGroarty anyways, even before all the drama, if it meant that Winnipeg addressed a big organizational need. Now, that said, I didn't really want it to happen, but I would have accepted it. So either way, as long as the Jets get a good return, I really don't care. That's pretty much the only thing I'm interested in. And, if Winnipeg solves an organizational need somewhere, whether it's a top 4D, maybe a big center of some sort as part of a whole package, you know what? That's pretty cool to me. So lots of options. And of course, as soon as that trade breaks, we'll have some analysis in the evening for you. I'll probably need at least a little time to stew over the deal, but hopefully we get something really interesting. But of course, I do want to talk a little bit about the buyout window. We are sort of involved in this, and I want to talk about, whether it's the right move to buy out Nate Schmidt, or if the Jets should be doing it for somebody else. We'll talk about that in just a quick moment. But before we go any further, just wanted to let you know about our friends and partners at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge victories. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Hey friends, and welcome back to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just chatting about some trade rumors and some stuff on the market that continues to heat up. Obviously for Winnipeg, the Jets are going to be involved in all of this. I could imagine that this is going to be a huge moment in the franchise's history, especially as Winnipeg is kind of litigating on whether or not they're going to be chasing the present, future, or both in one of these deals. And there's really any way that this could go. So color me cautiously intrigued by what the Jets could do, but also slightly nervous. The more options that they have, the more I do kind of start to be like, are they going to make the right choice? But I think the past few years have shown that, generally speaking, when the Jets are in this situation, they've done well. So I suppose I have more confidence than it might sound like. But obviously, before we talk about one of the big things, which is the buyout window and who the Jets should be looking at, just wanted to let you know that Fox Sports or ESPN, all of you listeners and watchers, some of you may find yourselves turning down the volume because there's too much shouting. If that's you, make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you daily to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Now, like I said, obviously for the Jets, the buyout window is an impactful one. Surprisingly so, and it really comes down to one of two players, Nate Schmidt or Neil Pionk. And Nate Schmidt, I think, is going to be the guy who's going to go. He's beloved in the room, and I think he's a really great personality. I think the Jets see him as the expendable veteran. For one reason or another, Neil Pionk has really become, for them, one of their standard bearers, which is very interesting because there were times this season when Pionk's ice time had to be cut because he was having a really bad game. With Schmidt, I don't really know that I've seen too many games where he was just abjectly terrible, right? He had some bad games here and there, but generally speaking, I thought that he was still competent, right? He's definitely on the wrong side of 30, and I think a lot of that two-way offensively minded puck moving ability from several years ago, it's gone now, right? You're mostly looking at a guy who's going to be a competent third pairing defender and probably not much more. The thing with this, though, is that Pionk is not going to be the one that gets bought out. They really like Pionk, and apparently there were rumors earlier this year about the Jets wanting to bring Pionk back at a lower price point, which for a lot of reasons, I would prefer the Jets go a different direction. I know that the right side D depth is not great. I know that in terms of their, offensively minded blue liners, they don't have a ton either. But I promise you, Pionk has not really been that guy. He had a good season during the bubble year when the quality of competition was generally on the lower side, right? You only had like Edmonton that year that I think was particularly notable, and like the Oilers were the Oilers, right? They still found a way to lose. So for me, I don't know. I wouldn't really be jumping over joy with Schmidt being the guy that's bought out here. I like Nate, and I think he actually brings a little more value to the ice than Pionk does at this stage. Neil just, he's slowing down, and it's really been apparent that he's tried to compensate, and it's really not gone well. I love him. I think he's always been very accountable. I also know that at this stage of his career, it's only going to go downhill from here. And I hate to say it, but I think we've all kind of seen the writing on the wall with him, and it's really not getting better. So the Jets have some really hard choices to make, and I think Pionk, for me, should be the one that they opt for. And I hate to say it, but I will say the one good piece of news for him is that I don't think he'd be unsigned for long. I think that there's probably at least one or two teams out there that would love to give him a contract. And in terms of like a personality, you really couldn't ask for better. The guy is extremely nice. I mean, in terms of somebody who's going to be a really positive force in the locker room, I think Pionk is a great option. While his on-ice performance may start to lag a little bit here, I think if you gave him a third pairing role, I think that would actually be a lot more helpful. I think just asking him to play like 20 plus minutes a night, that's not really where he's going to excel. But if you give him a like third pairing role, maybe in a number 6 spot, I think he can probably still do a pretty solid job. So, I know it's going to be Schmidt. I think it should be Pionk, but no matter what, it always sucks when you have to do this. It was painful when we had to say goodbye to Wheeler, although that contract really did need to go. With Pionk and Schmidt, I mean, that's just a lot of cash tied up between two defenders who are honestly, at this stage of their careers, third pairing guys. So the Jets are going to have to make some moves there. We will probably see a waiver announcement here pretty soon, but otherwise, it's just it's never a fun time, right? When you have to buy out somebody, it's just never good. Even when it works out for both parties, it's just not a fun experience. You're telling somebody that you're not good enough to make the grade, and we've got to essentially terminate the contract without quite terminating it. So, tough. It's not a good experience, not good vibes, and I think particularly with these two, both great human beings, it's kind of unfortunate, but either way, I'm sure it'll be Schmidt, and I just hope that as he rides off into the sunset of his career, he's had some pretty special times, man. I remember watching Nate back in the Caps days. He was absolutely a ball. He's always been a wonderful personality. And if this is really the end of his career with the Jets, and maybe getting close to the end of his NHL career, period, I wish him well. He's been an absolute joy. Every time he's on one of these recordings, he's just like the funniest guy in the room. And you can tell how much the team loves him. So going to be a tough goodbye. Elsewhere around the league, we are seeing, at least one or two buyout candidates being discussed. I think one of the biggest ones is, of course, Jeff Skinner. And Skinner, I have always liked Jeff, but I think, when that contract extension was signed, I think every single person who saw it was kind of like, he's not going to finish that. It was for like a huge amount of money. He was being paid a big salary, like almost $10 million a year. And like, it just, gotta be honest, it just was not going to go well. I think that he's a very skilled scorer. I think that he's got, some great finishing. And, at one point when he was with the Canes, he was a phenomenal winger. But as age kind of set in, I think the reality of his, quality of play kind of set in. He's not really a guy who's going to be driving a lot of results at 5v5. I think in terms of his ability to really be the dude on the ice, he's never been that kind of skater. He's been a great complementary winger. He had a couple of years where he was just absolutely scoring left and right. And in the right role, if you were to find a team that could give him a much smaller contract, one that's kind of more suited towards like a middle 6 role, maybe where he can play on like a third line or something and be a great tertiary scoring option. I actually think that could work out well, right? I don't think he's top line or top 6 material anymore, but if you put him in like a third line scoring role, I think he could be kind of like a team's Phil Kessel of sorts, a guy that you're going to have to accept is going to be more empty calories than you'd perhaps want to admit. Maybe he's going to feast off of power plays and stuff, but look, I mean, there's no mistaking the guy's like a 20-plus goal scorer for the last several years, and finishing talent is hard to buy at this level. I think he'll probably get a good contract somewhere. I wonder if he goes to Utah. I mean, the Utah team is looking to make a splash. Not that kind of splash, but I mean, if you're looking for an option that could play for a couple of seasons and potentially give you like 25 to 30 goals a year in a top 6 role while you figure out the rest of your depth options, I mean, it could be worse. Like I said, Skinner for me, if he was at like a $4 million price point or something, maybe 4.5 to 5, I think a lot of teams would be into that. I don't know if I would want the Jets to do that necessarily. I like Jeff, but I think Winnipeg at this point should not be going for aging veterans. I'd prefer that Winnipeg kind of stay more in the draft and develop mode at this point and try to improve internally. Aside from like a big trade with, say, McGroarty or something. Winnipeg is trying to apparently re-sign Sean Monahan, and I've already told you how I feel about that. I don't love it. I think it's going to end badly. As much as I really do actually like Sean a lot, I think we all know that his speed was kind of a problem in the postseason. Not as bad as Toffoli, but still noticeable. So, the Jets are going to do what the Jets are going to do. In terms of finishing talent, Monahan still got it, so you really can't be too upset there. But otherwise, if the Jets really just keep sticking to this slower approach, I do think at some point it's going to bite them in the butt once you get to the playoffs. But it is what it is. You just have to kind of accept it at this point and hope for the best. Now, there was some potentially positive news outside of Winnipeg that will impact the Jets. Arizona, of course, is being let go, and that means that the Jets 1.0 records and rights might be able to fall back under, or in terms of like the Jets 1.0 records might be able to fall back under Winnipeg's purview. We'll talk about that and what that could mean in just a little bit. But before we go any further, did want to shout out our friends and partners at Gametime. Obviously, Gametime has been around the block a couple of times. Like you, they've been ticket customers themselves at one point, and we all know that everyone hates buying tickets for concerts, for sporting events, all that fun stuff, because you get hit with a lot of surprise fees, big charges, and oftentimes when you buy these tickets, you're not even sure where you're sitting, right? You get a seat map or something that you hope is fairly accurate, but you don't always really get a sense of what the view is like. And Gametime wants to help, right? They've been there before. They know what it's like. That's why they're offering you a great set of features, including last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. It's why they're an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And best of all, prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it is to first pitch. Of course, as an O's fan, now is a great time for me to get in on Orioles tickets. Sure, the past couple of games have been a little bit rough, but Gametime gives you great perspective on Camden Yards, or if you're a Blue Jays fan, you can head up to, I forget what your center is called, Rogers or something, or maybe it's Air Canada, Lord knows. I'm sorry, I don't follow Blue Jays baseball, but, if you're buying tickets and you're heading out there, Gametime is a great option because they'll offer you flash deals, zone deals, all that fun stuff. And of course, you always get backed by their event cancellation protection, lowest price guarantee, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just wrapping up real quickly with some thoughts. Obviously, the Arizona Coyotes situation, it's not been good, if we're being honest. I think if you are a hockey fan, look, you can have all the mixed feelings about the Yotes that you want, and they're all valid. That franchise, I think for a lot of us hurts because a lot of you probably watched Jets 1.0 walk out and you thought you'd never get hockey back, and now you have it in the former Thrashers. But I think there's always been a bit of a disconnect where you don't have the 1.0 records, right? And that's always been a real sticking point. And now that the Yotes are gone, the franchise itself has been released by the Meruelo family. Well, there was apparently an option that Bettman was considering of giving the Jets back their old records, which would be in a lot of ways really cool. I think, pretty much everyone would be in favor of that. I can't imagine that there's anyone who wouldn't want the Jets 1.0 records back under the Winnipeg Jets brand. Maybe there's some strange people out there, but I think for all of us, I think this is like a great development. I think a lot of us are probably excited about that. I think a lot of folks would really enjoy having all of that sit back under the Jets umbrella, right? It's Winnipeg's records. It belongs to the city, and it should belong to the team. In terms of how that would work, I don't know if you have to sit through an application process or something, or if the league itself reviews that. You don't really see this kind of stuff happen very often. In fact, I don't remember the last time it really had happened. It's not been recently that much, I know, but Yeah, in terms of like what happened with Arizona, I do think it is kind of like it's tough, man. Like they have a really strong fan base out there, and while I don't love how they got there, I certainly do feel for um, the fan base and what's kind of transpired out of it. You ask me, and it just seems like they they deserve better, right? And kind of seeing the old Jets franchise being run into the ground by an ownership team that just did not care at all actually kind of hurts. Like not only do you lose the team, but you also watch somebody else really kind of curb stomp on your baby. Not that extreme, but like it does kind of have a pretty gross feel about it. I don't love that. I don't think it should be tolerated by the league, and I'm glad that that ownership team is gone. It was embarrassing, and now it's kind of time to move forward. And if the Jets can get their records back, I think that would be awesome. Having all of that back under as a unified franchise history, it would just feel great. I think the city would really embrace it. It'd be nice to not have to think about 1.0 versus 2.0. I think we'll always know that this version of the Jets is different. And obviously, I didn't become a fan until the 2.0 era of Winnipeg. But for a lot of you 1.0 fans, I'd actually love to hear about how you feel about this, and are you excited? Are you welcoming the franchise history back? Is there any reason you wouldn't want to have that under Winnipeg's purview again? I can't imagine that there is a reason, but maybe some of you have mixed feelings about what it's been since it departed. But in terms of moving ahead and moving forward, it does feel like the Jets franchise as a whole is moving in a new direction, right? You get to embrace your old history. You're starting to think about the future of this team. I guess the big question is, after this week, what does that future look like? Is it going to be something where the Jets try and make the most of the last few years of Hellebuck's prime? Are they going to try and also plan for the future a little bit more aggressively and draft and develop? I know that they have plenty of things that they're considering. I know that Scott Arniel is apparently leading the charge for a more data-based approach, which I think is pretty unique. We haven't had that before. Other teams, sure, but the Jets are certainly not one of those teams that I think has really focused on that side of the game. And it is increasingly important, especially when you're a team like the Jets and you don't have that much star power to work with, and you certainly don't have that much free agent attraction, or even in some cases trade attraction. It can be hard to get past those non-trade clauses and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, this week I think I'm just holding my breath. I want things to be good. I want something to be excited about. I feel better about this situation than I did at the start of like the Trouba or the start of the Dubois sagas. Those felt very uncertain, but now that we've seen the Jets do pretty well in the last few trades, the McGroarty thing doesn't feel as painful. I think if anything, it's just, I wish he had stayed and, wanted to be a future captain for the Jets, but apparently he just doesn't feel like it. So best of luck to him. Let's get some really cool prospects or players, perhaps both, out of all of this. But let me know what you're hoping for over the next couple of days. When do you think the McGroarty trade is going to go down? Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. As always, I thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day and sharing in our Jets fandom. But for tonight's episode, like I said, that's going to be all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we'll catch you later. Go Jets, go.